I'm Natalie Porter from Immaculate Confections. I'm here today to show you how to make this Christmas cake with a ball wreath design. The design consists of 3 stages to suit different skill levels and timescales available. I hope you enjoyed the video. Let's get started. We've got an 8-inch traditional fruitcake here. You can find the recipe in the magazine and on the website. And we will begin by preparing it to cover with marzipan. So, as with most cakes, when you bake them, you'll end up with a dome on top, which we don't necessarily want. So the first thing we'll do is cut that off so it's nice and level. If you've got a cake leveller, then obviously you can use that, but it needs to be a fairly sturdy one so it can cut through the fruit. Otherwise, a serrated bread knife will do. You can see the line here around the edge where the top of the cake tin was, so we will follow that line to make sure that we get a level cut. So having done that, when we're working on the cake, we'll flip it up, because then that way we've got the nice neat edge from the base of the cake to form the top of our cake once it's decorated. So I will put that to one side for a moment. So the first thing we need to do is attach our cake to the cake board. I've got here an 11-inch board, so we'll have quite a wide rim around the cake and therefore plenty of space to decorate. We're going to start by rolling out some marzipan. You want to give it a good knead so that it's nice and pliable. If we take our cake board, we've got some warmed up apricot jam here, which I'm just going to brush a little bit onto the board, like so, and then put the piece of marzipan we've rolled out on top. You can press that down, then a little bit more jam so that it sticks, and then we'll place our prepared cake upside down onto that, making sure that we've got it more or less in the middle there. And then with a smooth knife, not a serrated one, you just go around and cut away the excess from around the cake. Like so. If he's not quite in the middle, this is the point where you can shuffle it over ever so slightly. The next thing we want to do, again with our pastry brush and apricot jam, is brush it over the surface of the cake, because this is what will make the marzipan stick. Once you've brushed your cake, the next step is to fill any of the holes left by the fruit with little pieces of marzipan so that when we cover it, it's got a nice smooth surface. You just want to roll a tiny little piece, press it in and smooth it out, and then that way you'll have a smooth surface once you start to decorate. When you bake this at home, if you've got the kind of tin like this that leaves a ridge around the cake, to fix that so that it doesn't show once you ice it, what we can do is roll a very thin sausage of marzipan, like so, which we will then just stick on the edge to fill that gap. So once we put the marzipan covering and then the sugar paste on, it won't show and we won't have a peculiar ridge sitting there. Once you've placed the sausage, use your fingers to just press it down slightly, all the way around so that it's nice and even with the cake. Be sure to clean your surface and the board of any crumbs that have developed, and we're now ready to cover the cake in marzipan. Before we cover the fruitcake with the marzipan, make sure you clear away any crumbs that we've made. A little tip for you here, if you've got a spare bit or even a waste bit of marzipan or sugar paste, if you just knead it, make it into a ball and then wipe your surface with it. the marzipan or sugar paste will pick up all the crumbs and dust and fluff and anything else that may be there, sticking it onto this rather than the icing you're about to roll out. Leave him to one side. So, again, we need a nice, well-kneaded piece of marzipan. When you're rolling out marzipan and sugar paste, to get the right size, you need roughly the top of the cake plus twice the height, and then you'll have enough to go over and down both sides. If you're not sure, you can always use your rolling pin to measure how much that is, to just roughly mark it as you move along. So as you can see, if we roll a piece that's around the same diameter as the length of my rolling pin, it should be more than enough. Now that we've rolled out the marzipan, we need to transfer it onto the cake. If you place your rolling pin in the middle of the marzipan, grab one edge, fold it over. You can then use the rolling pin to lift it up like this. And then if you line up the bottom edge, you can carefully roll it over the cake and hopefully do so without any breaks or tears in it. Begin by using your hands to smooth down the top. Marzipan's fairly forgiving, so we don't need to be too precise just yet. Once the top's smoothed and attached, use the edge of your fingers to put pressure on that top edge of the marzipan, like so, and then slowly work your way down the sides of the cake, again gently pressing onto it to smooth it out. As you can see, it will form pleats, which you just want to carefully spread them out and then again press them down. If you keep turning the cake as you do it, you should be able to get all the way around with it nice and smooth in the end. Once you've got it smoothed down with your hand, we can go over it with a hard plastic smoother, which will just give us a nice finish to those surfaces. With this on that bottom edge, if you use it standing up and press fairly firm, that will make sure that the very bottom of the marzipan is attached to the cake. Once you've gone over the cake with the smoothers, we can trim off the excess from the bottom. Again, you just want a knife and nice and close to the edge there, following the line of the cake. Trim that off and then put the excess to one side or eat it. And again with the smoother, you just want to follow around that edge and just make sure that it's nicely tucked into the base of the cake. So you can leave it like this, perfectly fine, ready to cover in sugar paste. Or if you want a slightly sharper edge on it, you'll need a second smoother. You place one up against the side and another on top, and then you want to shuffle the one on top towards the one on the side to begin with, and then repeat the action, keeping the one on top still whilst you move the one on the side up. As you go all the way around the cake, you will start to form a slightly sharper edge on it. Once you've done that and got the sharp edge started, the next thing you can do to help it along is if you just use your fingers and pinch the edge slightly, like that, because again you can see it starts to form something approaching a right angle on the side there. Now you need to be very, very gentle when you do this, and the action you want to make is you pinch so that your thumb pulls the paste from the centre of the cake towards the edge, and your fingers are pulling the paste from the bottom up towards the top. And do it very, very gently so that you don't tear it. Once you've done that, we'll go over it again with our smoothers. First on the top, and then on the side. And as you can see, you start to lose the definitions of where you pinched it, but you just get that nice edge remaining. And then again with both, line them up together and slide it around the edge of the cake like that. Now, if you want to get a really smart edge on it, there's one last step you can do using acetate smoothers. It's the same principle, one on top, one on the side, and you slide them together like so, applying a firm but even pressure, which will then give you a pretty sharp edge. And then finally, if you want to just even out that edge, if you've got one that's got a right angled bent in it, you can just press that onto the edge with your fingers and just very lightly run that round, and it will smooth and even out any lumps or bumps that have developed on the edge. And there you have it, one marzipan cake ready for sugar paste. With a pastry brush and a little bit of sherry or brandy or whatever you've used in the cake, you just want to wet the surface of the marzipan, making sure that it's moist all over so that the icing will stick. To cover an 8-inch cake in sugar paste, you want about 900 grams of icing. You want to knead it nicely and again form a rough ball shape, as that will then form the basis for the shape we're going to roll out with the pin. We've got a little bit of waste icing again, which you can just rub over the surface you're using, so it will pick up any lingering crumbs, dust, fluff and so on. You can also just rub it on your hands, and again, any fluff or anything that's sitting on your hands will get picked up by this rather than landing on the cake. So we'll roll the icing out. With the sugar paste, you want to be a little bit more gentle than with the marzipan because it's not quite so forgiving. If it sticks to your surface, you can use either a little bit of white vegetable fat or some icing sugar underneath the icing to stop it sticking. Whatever you do use, you want to make sure that you turn it frequently, because the icing will form a seal with the surface that you're rolling out on, and that will stop it spreading and getting bigger as you roll. Once you've rolled your icing out, the next step is to then transfer it onto the cake. So again, we'll use our rolling pin to hold it, like so. Move the cake into the middle, and once more, roll the icing on. Now, sugar paste is not quite as forgiving as marzipan, so we're going to have to work a little bit quicker with this. So again, start by smoothing the top down with your hands. Even out the skirt of the icing, and then the next step again is to use this part to get the top edge and the very top of the sides attached. If your icing's going to tear, this will be where it will happen, because there the weight of the icing here is pulling it down. So that very top ½ an inch or so is the most important bit to get stuck down quickly to help prevent tearing. Once you've done that, the process is the same. You want to work your way down the sides, using your hands to press the icing to the cake. And then where you've got pleats like that, again, spread them out, press them down gently, just a little bit at a time, going around until you've got them all smoothed out and the icing attached. Like so again, we'll start with the hard smoother. Just run that over the top to get it stuck down. And then again, along the side to make sure that everything there is also stuck on nicely. Once you've attached the icing, if you've got any air bubbles, which you can feel, all you need to do is just prick the surface of the cake with a clean pin, like so, and you can press the air out, like that. And then smooth the icing over with your hand or the smoothers until the hole goes away, like that. The next step, we need to trim away the excess icing from the base of the cake. Again, we use the knife, just very carefully following that line. Now, put this icing to one side as we'll use it in a moment to cover the board. You want to cover it up in a bag so that it doesn't dry out. With the hard smoother, we'll just go around that edge to press the icing in. To keep working on those sharp edges that we started with the marzipan, the process is the same. You want to start off with the hard smoothers and run them around the edge. Again, pushing the icing from the centre out towards the edge with the top smoother. Once you've done that to start it off, we'll swap to the acetate smoothers again, and the process is the same. One on top, one on the side, and you want to smooth them round to make that nice edge. You can use the smoothers to just run over the rest of the cake, because again, this will help even out any little lumps and bumps you've got or any uneven parts in the sugar paste. And then the final step with the right angled smoother is to just very gently run it round to even out that edge. Now that we've covered the cake, we can ice the board. With the leftover sugar paste, knead it again so that it's nice and soft and pliable. Use a little more of the sherry or brandy and just brush a bit onto the cake board around the cake, being careful not to get it on the cake itself. And then put that to one side. If you roll the sugar paste into a fat sausage, if you just smooth down one side to squash it ever so slightly, and then use the rolling pin to roll that out into a nice long strip. As you roll, if it gets longer than the space you've got to work in, you can move it around. It's going to go around the cake, so you can always start to curve the paste as well. Once that's rolled out nice and evenly, take your knife and cut away the inside edge so that you've got a nice straight line there. so, and cut one end so that it's straight. Place your cake in front of you. Where this joins, we'll make sure is at the back of the cake, so make sure that you've got that in mind when you put this on. So you just want to lift it up. Again, if it's sticking to your work mat, you can always use a bit of either white fat or icing sugar so it doesn't stick. And you want to curl it around so that that cut edge gets nice and tight to where the cake is. And of course smooth it down as you go if it makes any lumps or bumps or air bubbles. Going all the way around. When you get to the end, if you just lay the tail over the top, you'll be able to feel where the original piece was, and you can just use your knife to cut that off. And then with your fingers, just shimmy them towards each other till the paste joins. And again, you want to smooth it down all the way around, like so. And then again with the knife, and you want a fairly sharp knife for this. If you find the edge of the board, you can use the cake board as a guide to cut all the way around to trim the excess. Again, smooth down that edge. If there's any bits where it hasn't cut quite even, you can just take a few little nicks off like that. And there we have an iced cake ready to decorate. So the first thing we'll do now is put some ribbons on the cake. I always use double-sided tape to attach them. We're going with a silver and green theme, so I've got some silver and green ribbon. Right, so we've got a nice wide silver ribbon to go around first. Like so, and then just to make it a little bit different, we'll put a green piece on there as well to layer the ribbons. We can now attach the ribbon to the board. So again, using double-sided sticky tape, we'll put that straight onto the edge there and then peel back the paper. If the tape doesn't want to stick to the board, run round it with a piece of kitchen paper, because the board may have become a little bit greasy from the marzipan and fruitcake. Once you've got half a dozen or so pieces of tape on, you can stick on the ribbon. Usually for a cake board you would want 12 or 15mm ribbon. I have 6mm here, so I'm going to use 2 pieces and layer them up. So the first bit, again, start round the back, and we want to attach it and stick it onto the tape so that the ribbon is level with the top of the icing on the board. And then we'll repeat that again with the second piece of ribbon, but this time we'll line it up with the bottom of the board. we have a ribboned cake ready for the next step. To make the baubles to form the wreath on top of the cake, you want a mixture that's half and half flour paste and sugar paste to form a modelling paste. Give it a good knead so it's all mixed in. And then we want to make a series of small balls in different sizes, which will be the baubles. If you break off a small piece of paste and just roll it in between your hands like that. If you want to make sure it's completely round, if you give it a little roll on the table, very, very gently, you can make sure that you get the shape right. Make 4 or 5 different sizes, with the largest maybe about the same size as a 10p piece, working your way down until you've got smaller ones. Keep making balls from the 50-50 flour paste and sugar paste mixture until you've got enough to form a wreath like this. Vary the sizes so you've got big ones and small ones. Mix it up a bit so you've got plenty there that will eventually then stick onto the cake. First we need to colour them, which we will do using a sandwich bag. You'll need a bag for each colour you want to do, and I'm going to start off with pearl coloured one, so I've just got a pearlescent coloured lustre dust here. So you just want to drop a tiny little bit into your sandwich bag, like that, and then chuck in some baubles. Once they're in, seal it closed and give it a good shake. As that will cover the balls in the right colour. If you need to put a little bit more in and give it another shake, then go ahead, not a problem. You can put those to one side. So I've got a pale silver here. And follow the same process, and then lastly I want to do a couple in shades of green. So what I'm going to do is mix some green petal dust with some of the pearl dust, and that will give us a pearly green colour. And one final bag with a slightly darker green. So again, a little of the pearlescent dust, followed by the green. Remember when you're colouring things that it's always easier to add more colour than it is to take it away. So start off with just a tiny little bit and you can always add more afterwards if it's not quite dark enough in the colour that you want. With this darker one, because the colour's darker, it's left little spots on the baubles, but that's going to add to the look we're going for very nicely. So once they're done, if you close your dust up, because there is nothing worse than getting lustre dust everywhere. Right. You take all the balls out of the bags. If you just roll them in your hand slightly, that will help remove any excess dust that's sitting there. So, running away. So we've got the darker ones, the paler green ones, the silver ones, and the pearly white ones. So again, before we start sticking them onto the cake, it can be useful if you just arrange them on your workboard, and you'll get a feel for where you want the different ones to go and the colour of the placement, and then we'll transfer them onto the cake and stick them down. Once you've arranged them all in a wreath shape like this to see where they're going to fit, we can then start sticking them on the cake. To do that, you can just use a tiny little bit of royal icing in a piping bag, or some edible glue would work also, or even just some water. So yeah, just press them into the blob of royal icing. And keep going until they're all stuck on. And there you have it. Once all your baubles are stuck on in a wreath shape, that's stage 1 of the cake finished. To complete stage 2 of our design, we're going to add a sugar paste bow onto the front of the wreath here. This is flour paste, which I've kneaded lots so that it's plenty pliable. To prevent it sticking to our work mat, I'm going to use a little bit of corn flour so it doesn't stick. I've got my small rolling pin, and we just want to roll it out into a long rectangle. So once you've finished rolling out your paste, if you need to give your surface another dust, then do so, because we don't want this to stick or we'll ruin the shape when we try to pick it up. We'll cut the bow freehand, and for a bow you need a shape like this. If it's not perfect to begin with, don't worry, because we can always trim extra bits off. And in fact we can see that this end is a little bit bigger, so I'm just going to trim that down there. We'll then flip that over. You want a little bit of water in the centre there. You fold in the edges of the bow like that. That will be the back, so we'll flip it over. So you've got your basic bow shape there, and then very carefully you just want to pinch the centre like so to make some creases in it. To help it keep its shape while it's drying, you can use a little bit of kitchen paper. You just want to roll it up like that, and you can just feed that through the loops of the bow so that it keeps its shape. We're going to need a centre for the bow, so we can cut that from this same piece we've got here. So again, using your cutting wheel, you just want to cut a shape like that. Which will wrap around like so. So again, if we lay that down flat, turn the bow over and put it on. And again, with a little bit of water, fold in one edge and then the other. We need to make some tails for the bow, so if you re-knead the leftover flour paste, again, dust your surface with a little corn flour so it doesn't stick, and roll it out. Using the cutting wheel, we just need to do a couple of tails for the bow, that are the right size relative to the bow that we've made. With these, you can either cut them at an angle, like that, or if you wanted to, you can put a V, like you would with a real piece of ribbon, whichever you prefer. And again, if they're not quite the right size and the same as each other, you can just even them out slightly. Re-knead the leftover flour paste, put it to one side, and keep it covered in cling film so that it doesn't dry out too much. So with these, you want to pinch the top of the tail, like that. And once we stick it on the cake, they're going to sit underneath and form the bow. Once your bow has had a little while to dry, so maybe 15-20 minutes so that it sets up a bit, we can dust it so that it matches the rest of the cake. You can use a piece of kitchen paper or a plate or a little artist palette to put your dust on. I'm going to start with the pearly dust and give everything a nice coating of that to give it a shimmer. Once you've used the pearl dust all over, we're going to add a little spot of green just to give it some highlights and so it matches the rest of the wreath. So we'll want to mix a little bit of green with the pearl dust. And then at the top of our tails, we just start with the green, draw the paintbrush down towards the end so that we get a nice colour gradient on it. Like so, and you can see that will match our cake nicely. And then with the bow itself, again, the green mixed with the pearl. We'll do some shading on that centre bit. And some more from the centre on the bow itself. There we have our pearlised coloured bow. We can now stick the bow onto our cake. To make space for him, I'm just going to remove a couple of the baubles so we've got a space at the front. If you carefully lift it on so you can get the positioning right. And of course the tails will sit underneath. If you do this fairly quickly, there'll still be a bit of movement in the flour paste there, so you can make sure that everything has a nice shape as it sits on the cake. Once you're happy with it, you can fix everything in place again with a couple of dabs of royal icing. There we have the bow on our cake. As a final flourish for the second stage of the design, we're going to add some pearl and silver balls to it. With the pearl ones, I've got the the bag that had the green dust in it from when we did the baubles in step 1. I'm going to put some pearls in, give it a shake to give them a slightly green hint to them. Again, if you need to, you can add a little bit more dust to bring the colour out. So we'll just use them to fill some of those gaps in between our larger baubles. If you want to put some around the edges, again, you want to use just a little tiny drop of royal icing. And you can either place them by hand, though that can be quite fiddly, or use a pair of tweezers. Having added the various green and silver balls, we've now finished stage 2 of the design, and as you can see, it's still clean and simple, but a little bit jazzed up in comparison to the first stage. To make the flowers for the third stage of the design, we'll want to go back to the flower paste we had before, knead it well to freshen it up, and once it's warm and pliable, we're going to want to roll it out fairly thin. So again, we can use a little corn flour so that it doesn't stick to our table. We're going to use a calyx cutter to make the flowers. This is the smallest size. Want to cut it out. When you're cutting things, if you rub your finger on the cut edge, it will get rid of any frills or imperfections in the cut. We will use the small end of the ball tool to just pop it out. And we'll press it in our mould. So again, a little bit of corn flour so that everything doesn't stick. Place the flour there. With this, I find it's helpful if you press the centre down ever so slightly, because then there's less chance that the top of the mould will break the flour when you press it down. Like that, and we can pop him out. And then because we want those petals to be nice and sharp, we'll just pinch the edge of each one. And then put it to one side to dry. If you've got some, you can use some drying foam like this, because it will sit nicely in the holes, and that will keep it sharp, keep its shape whilst it dries. If you don't have one of these, you can use an egg box, or you can even make your own former from a trusty piece of kitchen towel. If you just twist it up, make it into a circle and fold it under like that, that should then be enough of a ring that you can put your flower on it, and it will dry in the right shape. Once your flowers have had a chance to dry, we'll dust them with a little pearl lustre so it matches the rest of the cake. Remember, if you don't have a mould and veiner, you can just use the calyx shape on its own, but make sure that you press it into something to dry so that you get the shape of the flower. Right. Once the flowers are dusted, we'll use a little bit of royal icing to add them into our wreath. To make the centre of the flowers, I've got some tiny silver balls. So we're going to pipe a dot of royal icing, a fairly large dot, into the middle of each flower, and then put 4 or 5 or even a few more silver balls in, which you'll want to press down using a ball tool or something similar. As a final flourish, I'm just going to give the cake a quick once over with the silver shimmer spray. You want to keep fairly far away from the cake and turn it as you go. So there we have it, our completed green and silver bauble wreath Christmas cake. I'm Natalie Porter from Immaculate Confections. I hope you've enjoyed this video and found it useful. I'd like to wish all the sugar crafters and cake makers out there a very Merry Christmas from all of us at Cake Decoration and Sugarcraft.